Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Tonight's format, for those of you that might be new, is an open forum. So any live questions that you might have, you can submit those at any time. We always go to the pre-submitted questions first. You can always send in questions. You can send in suggestions, requests to webinar@evoketherapy.com. Before we get to our first pre-submitted question, our only pre-submitted question, and the live questions that have come in, I want to make this announcement. We are hosting our next iteration of the Conscious Parenting Seminar. This will be September 29th, 2023, 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll take an hour break for lunch. This is a full day with me talking about parenting issues. It's interactive. We limit the number of people that can sign up for it so that there's enough space that you can share your questions, that you can have personal examples, that I can respond to those. We have a couple of small breakouts during this period. So if you're interested, you can email intensives@evoketherapy.com or call 866-411-6600. Look forward to that. It's actually a day and an event that I really look forward to and that goes by really fast. So with that preamble, with that advertisement, let's get into the first pre-submitted question. Somebody writes in, can you speak to parenting adult children? How does parenting shift as your children become adults? I have a son that's 43 and another son that's 38. I would appreciate hearing your thoughts around healthy parent-child relationships at this stage. It's a wonderful question. And let me start by going backwards, panning out, and giving some context for my answer, my thoughts about this question. First of all, one of the biggest, most common, I suppose, complaints that I get from families, from parents, or from couples is when I give an instruction, when I give a principle, when I offer a tool that I think fits within a certain dilemma, a certain question, that people will come back at me either immediately or they'll come back at me after letting that marinate for a while or trying it out and say, it doesn't apply, it doesn't work. You know, I have a child that's on the spectrum. My child is like this one, 38 years old. And you're talking about parenting of adolescents primarily, young adults primarily. And while that is true, while there are some things that make those specific tasks, that is parenting an adolescent or a young adult child, while there are some things that make that unique, and therefore they deserve specific instruction, there are many, many more principles that are broadly applicable. So somebody sends me an email like this once in a while asking for parenting and asking if I have any podcasts or broadcasts that are specific for this age range. And my first response is all of them. You know, the one of my favorite quotes from a child educator says that the proper way of treating a child is the proper way of treating another human being. In essence, there are more principles that apply to all of our relationships than that apply narrowly. So yes, there are different decisions around support that you would give. There are different decisions specific around boundaries that you're going to apply to a 5-year-old versus a 15, a 25, 35, and so on, of course. But the same principles inform you, right? We talk about doing your work. We talk about setting boundaries, which are, in essence, an extension of selfhood, of who you are, an extension of self-care, a practice of self-care. You know, there's not even the same application for the same age range when you have somebody over here that is on the spectrum versus somebody over here that has other learning differences versus somebody over here who is in active addiction. There are specific considerations in each of those categories, but the overall psychology is the same. One of the quotes, I think I've shared it a couple of times in the last few broadcasts, is that old Zen proverb that says, the way you do one thing is the way that you do everything. If you walk into an Al-Anon meeting and you get stuck on the fact that the first 5 people who share are talking about their alcoholic husband or wife or their alcoholic parent, if you get stuck on that specific, you'll miss the point. What you're listening for are what are the principles that are involved here? So it's the same. It's boundaries. It's your shame. It's your guilt. It's your programming. It's their trauma. You know, it goes back to that very first idea in the journey of the heroic parent. That shift from the question is not what do I do? And I think this is a question that speaks to the idea really well of what do I do? And the idea is to shift that question from what do I do to what I think is the real question, or what I think are the real questions, which are, who am I, first and foremost? What is my relationship to this child, this other person? What's my relationship to their issues, to their dilemma? Do I feel like I caused it? Do I feel like I can fix it? Do I feel like I can control and manage outcomes? And addressing those questions, by addressing those questions, all the rest of our questions about what do I do are answered. So I love your question because it's so common. I would say, just like I talk about all the time, if you're looking for resources, read the same books that I've written about this. Read The Journey of the Heroic Parent, or The Audacity to Be, or listen to podcasts. That's my input to your dilemmas. I suspect you're hindered by the same limitations that a parent of a 13-year-old on the spectrum is hindered by, even though the circumstances are unique, of course. You have different obligations toward a 13-year-old than you do a 23 or a 33 or a 43-year-old. But answering the questions about what are your obligations is the same process. I hope that makes sense. And I'm not kicking the can, passing the buck with this question. I think part of this broadcast that I do, this video broadcast and podcast that I do, is to teach parents, to expose parents to a certain way of thinking, of analysis. I've shared with you my favorite quotes from Carl Jung and from James Hollis, a modern analyst who's still writing today. I've shared with you all this idea that they talk about, that the instruction that is relevant in the morning is outdated by the afternoon. And what is today's freedom, today's idea or tool that liberates us, is tomorrow's constraint. And those are just poetic ways therapeutically of talking about the fact that there's no generic solution. There's no template. There's no pattern. This is a human, organic, constantly moving process for all of us. I have 4 children, and the same parenting, even approach, if I look at specific models of approach, doesn't work for all 4 of them. The one that I have right now that's 15 is a different human being in so many accounts than is the child that's just her elder, the one that's just older than her, and so forth and so on. And so when people focus on the differences, and this is one of, I think, one of the great truths about mental health and psychology, when people focus on the differences, they're missing the point. This is not universally true, but I think about this constantly. And I think if you pay attention and watch this in yourself and in others, you'll find this pattern to be true a large percentage of the time. That the more healthy, the more evolved we get, the larger that we become, psychologically speaking, the more we see similarities between ourselves and others. The less evolved, the less educated that we are, the less healed we are, the more we see differences between ourselves and others. And that is why the wisest human beings that ever walked on planet Earth compare themselves or see traits of themselves in the most compromised of human beings. They don't look at the anger and the acting out of somebody violent and say, oh my gosh, I can't imagine that. I can't even understand that. What they say is that my anger is not so different than that person who acted it out much more tragically, in a much more devastating way. So to me, the question speaks to this idea that you've got to find the psychology of it. You've got to find the boundary. You've got to find the work. You've got to find where you're limited. You've got to find where your vision has been obscured by your own programming. And yes, you have different responsibilities and different obligations for the different ages that your children are than to what I specifically speak to or speak about. But that doesn't mean that the psychology is not the same. Because it is. And that's why we can go to meetings and sit beside somebody who struggled with an alcoholic spouse for 20 years, who was raised by alcoholic parents, who's raising a child who's suffering from substance use disorder, that's 13 and that's 23. and we can get wisdom out of it, right? Otherwise, we would have to narrow down all of our support groups and all of our education and all of our writing and all of our teaching to such a narrow field that we would have to give instruction to each individual parent for each individual child for each individual day. And that's not, of course, that's not something that we can really do. So like when you listen to this, when I talk, when I teach, especially with the open forums like the one today that we're doing, the one tonight that we're doing, when I talk about these principles and answer these questions, what I would like to invite you to do is practice answering them yourselves first. What would be your answer to this question? And in regards to a 43 and a 38-year-old child, what I would venture to guess, and this is a pretty big leap for me, but I'm going to make it anyway, is that there are tasks that have been neglected or not tended to over the course of your parenting. If you're struggling in these relationships, these are long overdue tasks that deserve and need your attention, that would benefit from your attention. So I hope that helps. But my answer is, if you're looking for instruction, if you're looking for wisdom from me, listen to any of these podcasts and any of these broadcasts and see if you can understand the psychology that informs my answers, my approach. And when you find that psychology, attachment-based psychology, analytical psychodynamic psychology, family of origin, family system psychology, when you find that psychology and when you tune into that vibration, that way of thinking, that will inform your answers with your children. And of course, I shouldn't move on from this question before saying this. That's why I value psychotherapy so much, because having that kind of dialogue with a therapist, learning from them specific to your child, to your specific questions, helps you apply the psychology. That's why the Conscious Parenting Seminar, by the way, it's being held on September 29th. That's why we limit it to 24 people, is so that I can have interactive discussions with several of you, those that are interested, and that I can hopefully show you how it applies to several different situations. Next question that comes in, live question that comes in, is what's the best way an older sibling can support a client student during the Willer's therapy? I think writing letters. Well, two questions. First of all, we have to make sure that the older sibling is in a position where they want to help. So if this question is coming from the older sibling themselves, I'm happy for that. If this question is coming from a parent who hopes or wants or thinks that an older sibling should help the child, then I'm going to challenge that a little bit. That might be your need. That might not be the older sibling's need. And that might not even be the younger sibling's need. So if that's the case, if you're just asking it because you think it needs to be asked and the older sibling isn't asking that, I would challenge you to identify whose need you're attending to, who's really needing that information. That's the first point. But now going to answer your question more directly. If an older sibling is interested, what I would encourage them to do is become involved in the parent portal. Look at the assignments that are appropriate. I'm not talking about reading letters that weren't written to you, but look at the assignments, including the several broadcasts or books or letters. You don't have to do all of that, of course, but to immerse yourself in the psychoeducation that we give to families, to parents. Listen to some of these broadcasts. Attend this broadcast. Ask the question that you're asking. Write letters. And most importantly, be a student. Be a student to this work. I think the mistake that I've seen older siblings make is they show up wanting to mentor or to teach. They don't think of it this way, but in essence, they come into this idea with a sort of top-down energy. And oftentimes the older sibling has been the good one. The older sibling has gone through the stages that the younger sibling who's struggling is going through, and they've navigated it somewhat successfully, and they're at least on the other side of it. and they want to come with wisdom. But I love when you come with your questions. I love when you come with your beginner's mind. I love when you come from not knowing. I love when you ask the identified patient, the child in treatment, teach me about this. Or I just read the Knight in Rusty Armor or Man's Search for Meaning, two of the books that we recommend to our students. Or the I think the third one is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I just read those, where I just read The Audacity to Be You. And I have this question. What do you think about this? Let yourself be the student. I can remember specifically, I've told the story before, where I had an older sibling contact me. I was doing some parent coaching with their parents, and they contacted me asking about an upcoming visit and phone call with the identified patient, the younger sibling. And they were very nervous about saying the wrong thing, or stepping on their sibling's toes, or saying something that would trigger some kind of regression. And after they shared their anxieties and fears, I said, why don't you come with that? Why do you come asking your younger sibling, your younger sister, what would be helpful? How can I help you? How can I support you? What might be triggering? I'm feeling anxious about saying the wrong thing. I don't know what to say. Come, in other words, with your not knowing. And let the identified patient, for the first time, probably in many cases, definitely in this case, let them be the teacher. Let them be the expert. Don't come as the expert. Come as the non-expert, because you are that. They're having this experience right now. And when I suggested this to the sibling that I'm referring to, their response is, no way do I want to do that. That's too anxiety producing for me. So then I took a few steps back and worked on some concepts and some principles that would help them get a starting point. But I will tell you this, one of the remarkable things that happens with children in treatment in our treatment program is they realize fairly quickly that because of their struggles, because of the intervention, that they're learning and moving past their entire family of origin in some ways. Some insights, some practice with some tools, for sure. I remember another young man having a call with his older brother that he looked up to as a hero. And he asked his older brother, how do you feel about me being here? Or how do you feel about the way that I treated mom and dad? I think that was his question to his older brother, who was in his 20s. This young man was 15 or 16. And the older brother went on to answer his ideas with his ideas. And the younger brother, the young man that was in treatment with me, asked it again. He said, no, I'm asking you how you feel. What were the feelings that came up for you? And again, the older brother answered with some of his ideas. And a third time, the child in treatment said, I'm asking about your feelings. And the older brother again pivoted to talk about his feelings. And the child on the phone, on the satellite phone, in the program, stopped asking. And once his brother got off the phone, I spent a couple of extra minutes with him, and I said, how does that feel? He said, it's really disappointed and surprising. And I said, you know what's really cool about it is you can see, because of your struggles, you have some awarenesses that your older brother, who you look up to for good reasons, that you look up to, you have some insights and some tools and some awarenesses that he doesn't have. And that's got to feel good in some ways. And he said, it feels good, and it also feels disappointing. But I tell you those stories because I think even for parents, this is one of those ideas that applies to parents also. It's not your expertise that is the gold in this process. It's not your wisdom or your lectures that are the gold and the wonderful catalyst of this process. It's your ability to model vulnerability. It's your ability to model accountability. It's your ability to apologize. It's your ability to let go of ego. It's your ability to adopt a beginner's mind and to say more often, I don't know, or I'm going to think about that. Part of what these young people in our program are resisting is that they are always everybody's project. And everybody, quote unquote, knows more than they do, has the answers. And as you all know, just by me saying that, that stinks to be in that position for them. That sucks to be the project. One of the great things that happens is when parents come out to the wilderness to visit their children, the children, because where they've been, are able to cook for them, able to build a shelter for them, have the local knowledge of how to take care of the parents in a camping context. And even though it's just within that limited context of camping outside, it gives the child some sense of efficacy, and it empowers them, makes them feel good about themselves. So if you really want to know how to support a younger sibling, be a student. Come with a beginner's mind. Expose and immerse yourself to the curriculum that we offer any and all parents. And talk about what you're learning, what you didn't know. I can't think of anything more helpful than for a non-identified patient to say to the identified patient, my issues are just as significant as yours. They might not show up as obvious as yours do in the world, but my codependency or my anxiety or what I've struggled with, my esteem, is just at times as compromising as whatever it is that you're dealing with. And I'm going to work on that. Mom and dad, all of you that are listening, all of you that are watching right now, that's the secret sauce. That's the magic healing contribution that any of you can make to your child's program and your child's support. That's why we provide these broadcasts for parents forever. Because if we can help the family shift from thinking that the identified patient is the problem to everybody is their own problem, we take the pressure off the identified patient and open up some space for more healing for them. So I hope that makes sense. Another question comes in that says, as the participants progress, are their meds reduced or modified or eliminated? We are agnostic when it comes to medication. We are a relatively short-term program. So our default position is that we seek to change nothing that the child came in with. Now, I have a caveat to that, obviously, a qualification for that, obviously, which is if the parents and or the child begin to ask about medical changes, or if we observe something that is an obvious side effect or an obvious limitation that's being caused by medication, we'll begin to consider with our psychiatric team. Our psychiatric team will determine with our consultation a change, a reduction, or an increase in medication. But remember, when you're introducing a child to an intervention as comprehensive as wilderness therapy, you don't want to change other variables like medication, right? Then you won't know what the positive or the negative change, what's causing it. So you want to change things slowly. At Evoke, this is our philosophy. This is my philosophy. This is the philosophy of the clinical team. We are agnostic when it comes to medication. We know that some people benefit from it, and we know that some people don't. We know that sometimes it's not worth the side effect or the risk. And sometimes it is, for sure, clearly. And we don't want to come into this assuming that we're going to reconsider and calibrate everybody's medication. Typically, what we will see is that the therapist will upon discharge, make a recommendation for a reevaluation of medication once the client has stabilized in the next setting, the longer term setting. And it's in rare cases that we will look at. We're willing to look at it. We have people that are in place ready to do that. We can change medication one way or the other, and we have somebody that can prescribe and do that. But it's not a default. Our default is to keep it status quo and to look for exceptions to that rule and to look for that to change once a longer term setting is established. And again, I always think about medication as this. If the person is so compromised that they can't get into the starting gate, therapeutically speaking, they can't even make use of therapy, then we should look at medication changes. Right? Medication doesn't do everything on its own. Therapy, psychoeducation, skill building, all of that still is important. But for some people, because of the limitations that they might experience cognitively, mood-based, they can't even hear, they can't even make sense, they can't even retain the information. And in those cases, that's why I'm going to refer them to the psychiatric department at Evoke and have them reevaluated. So I hope that makes sense. Next question that comes in, somebody writes, I am a parent of a student who has just started with Evoke with one of our therapists, Matt. I have so many questions that I barely know where to start. I was not sure what format this webinar would be, but thinking it is a live introduction to the program, FAQ sessions. Every other session, every other one of these sessions is a topic and then a live Q&A. Topic and then a live Q&A, and we go back and forth. Part of our idea for these live sessions is to open it up to family members and siblings so that they can have their questions addressed and answered. So you're also welcome to share that with the people in your circle that you want to have some kind of involvement in this process, some kind of awareness of this process. Share the links for these. And then we have a library of well over 500, somewhere around 550 previous broadcasts. You can go to our website, our parent portal, the back end after you log in, and you can search for them there. Or you can go to anywhere where you consume podcasts, Spotify, iTunes podcast app, soundcloud.com. You can look there and you can scroll through the more than 550 topics that we've done broadcasts on. Also, within the parent portal, you'll have 2 each week. We kind of take you through a curriculum in the parent portal. And I know, especially my broadcasts, I know that when you're a new parent like you, that what I'm talking about is like getting a drink of water from a fire hose. I'm well aware of that. And I also want to tell you that what we're teaching at Evoke is not your common sense therapeutic knowledge, right? At Evoke, we're not giving you formulas and prescriptions of how to fix your kids with their current dilemmas. That's not the mission that I have. My mission is to get you involved in your own work, your own thinking, your own creative problem solving, to give you some awareness of what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who's struggling with mental illness or addiction, and to give you some tools and ideas about how to start to make sense out of this. My experience is, folks, that a lot of people who come through our program or find these broadcasts or read my books will, in the initial phases, say, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand what he's talking about. And first of all, he talks too fast, or he talks in ways that don't make sense to me. And I don't get it. That is the most common reaction to the Evoke curriculum, to the podcasts. After a while, if you stick with it, if you see just a glimmer of something different, of some hope, after a while, it begins to make sense. Eventually, and I've heard this hundreds, if not thousands of times, it'll all make sense to you. So Evoke's curriculum, Evoke's parent education program is a fundamental shift. Remember, and this goes back to some very basic training, the idea that parent education doesn't change children. Parent education changes parents. And that change can have a profound impact on a child and their development. You have to unlearn so many things in this process. So thanks for joining. Be patient with it. Go back and look at some of the broadcasts that make sense to you. Buy The Journey of the Rogue Parent, The Audacity to Be You. Start getting yourself familiar with the curriculum. Give it a little bit of time. If you already know the answers, even the way of thinking, if what I had to say to you all was basic, I wish I could share this with you. I wish I could share with you that on this broadcast, there are people that show up week after week for years. There are people on this broadcast that I met many, many years ago in the context of supporting them through their child's treatment process. And the reason that they show up still is not because I'm going to teach them something brand new, is because you have to hear it over and over again. You have to hear it over and over again. You have to hear it's a way of thinking about mental health and mental illness. For example, the most simple example is it's about realizing that the only thing you can change is yourself and not the child. But by adopting that understanding, that belief, by knowing and living by that, you are a more dynamic parent. In other words, by not trying to change anybody else, you become more influential in other people's lives. It like so many things in mental health is paradoxical. So keep showing up, keep asking questions, keep listening. It'll make more and more sense as you go along. And I'm happy to answer the basic questions too. Some of the questions tonight are from parents who are asking some of those initial questions. Somebody writes, can you talk about the importance of parent visits with your child while they are out in the field? It's one of the things that Evoke Therapy programs, when we started in 1998, our parent company, it's one of the things that we changed. We think it is essential for you to practice being with your child in real time. Again, it's not like we're going to fix your child or fix you or fix the family. We don't fix people. We don't look at mental health that way. We're going to get you on a path, and getting out there and dealing with the challenges, the discussions in real time is the best way to address and to work on your stuff. So we were the first wilderness program, I think, anywhere. And now it's really common, but we were the first ones to have parents out before their child was toward the end of their process. A lot of people were afraid because they used to say it's messy. It's messy to bring parents out midway through the process. And my response is good. Let's get into the mess. It's just like taking your car to a mechanic and not being able to replicate the noise that you're bringing it in for. You all know what that's like. You know, you've gone to somebody to get help and you haven't been able to show them the problem. So you come out. I have a couple of broadcasts on preparing for the parent visit. Please read that in advance. And what I say in there, which I'll recap now, is don't come out looking to celebrate. That will happen anyway. You'll celebrate naturally. Don't come out trying to have a good visit. Parents who come out trying to have a good visit will avoid difficult subjects, will end up being inevitably really disappointed at the challenges that they're still experiencing with their child, especially in contrast to the letters that their child is writing, right? That are a lot easier for the child to manage their own behavior. Even though we don't edit them and coach them what to say, it's a lot easier to write a letter and look good. But come out and get into it with us. Have some difficult conversations. Revisit some old topics or issues that in the past have been problematic. And then let the therapeutic process and the therapist, let them help to redirect your family and to find out why it's getting stuck and how it can get unstuck. So we think that they are essential. I remember, I've said this before, when I had a parent, I was doing parent visits with a family, and the consultant that I was working with at the time said, this idea that you guys have that nobody else was doing at the time, where you're bringing out families, midway through the process, it kind of takes away the shine for the graduation. That's what they used to call it. For the graduation, the reunification at the end of the program. It kind of makes it less exciting at the end. And at first I was defensive and I wanted to argue and defend it. Now, after I thought about it and just listened for a moment, I realized she's right. It does take off the shine. It does make that end of program visit somewhat anticlimactic. And then I realized that's a good thing. Because yes, it will be climactic for most of you when you see your child again for the first time. It'll be wonderful for most of you to wrap your arms around your child and for them to wrap their arms around you. And everybody will be really grateful for seeing each other. But Tuesday morning, when it's time to go to school, when the child gets home, that's where the real challenge is. That's where the rubber meets the road, as they say. Those old challenges will come up. And now you get to put to the test the new skills, the new tools, the new insights, the new awarenesses you have as a parent and as a family. So we want to give you as much real-time exposure and practice as possible. Next live question. Somebody writes, my family is new to Evoke programming. And while I dive into this work, I'm constantly struggling with this new feeling that I'm a bad parent. Oh, I'm so glad that you wrote this. I have only one child at Evoke Wellness who struggles with extreme anxiety, depression, and anger management issues. And another child who has a successful relationship, success at school, and in other endeavors, and in general is a well-functioning, happy person. How could I have known that one child needed to be parented so differently than the other? Or should I be focusing more on the fact that I cannot control outcomes, but rather to just deal with what is in front of me. Either way, I'm still having a hard time getting past my own feelings of failure and guilt. And those feelings are getting in the way of me being able to dive into this work. The more I learn from the materials and resources being offered to me, the more I sense the growing feeling that I'm a bad parent who did everything wrong, even if I logically know that that isn't true. Gosh, this is one of my favorite questions of all time. This is one that I shared this last week that I used to get a lot in the early days of my instruction. I'm going to tell you a story that some of you have heard more than once, but I'm going to tell you it to illustrate my thinking on answering this question. About a little over 3 years ago, just before the pandemic, I was invited to a speaking event in Southern California where I grew up and where my family still lives. My younger brother, who I'm very, very close to, very good friend of mine, invited my mother, not quite knowing what my desires were and probably just assuming that I would invite her. And he invited my mother to come. And I will tell you, giving a talk on parenting with your parent present is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do as a professional. But my mother's getting older. She has a head injury, which has limited some of her cognitive functioning. I talk really fast, as you can hear. And I thought I could kind of outrun her, and she wouldn't capture all of it. But I go through my process. It was a really great talk. I felt really great about it. And I'm signing books in the lobby, in the reception area afterwards. People are coming in talking to my brother standing right there. And my mother walks up to me and my brother at one point when the crowd thins a little bit. My mother says to my brother and I, to my brother and me, she says, I'm beginning to think I should feel badly for some of the ways that I raised you guys. And I paused and thought about that for a moment. I thought, well, I don't know about the bad feeling. I said, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but it would be nice if you knew the mistakes that you made. I was thinking, especially for my brother, who hasn't been as much therapy as I have, it'd be nice for him if you could acknowledge and see the mistakes that you've made and the mistakes that you're still making, by the way, because she still continues to make the same mistakes along the same theme to this day. So I said, that would be nice. That would be a gift for both of us. But the bad feeling you have, I don't think that will help. And I can't do anything about that. In fact, I think the bad feeling will prevent you, much like you're saying in this question, it will prevent you from seeing what you've done. So you've got to figure that out yourself. The point of this story and the entry point into your question, it is our guilt and our shame that is the problem. Good psychotherapy over a long period of time results in the individual realizing that they are a beautiful miracle, a gift to the world, a diamond, a gem, but that they're also a buffoon, that they're an idiot, that they're tough to live with, that the fact that their family of origin, their spouse even tolerates them is a wonderful, graceful gift. So this work, the guilt and the shame is the work, you guys. The guilt and the shame, and I always see this in my mind's eye this way. The guilt and the shame are sentinels. They are guards that stand in the way of the pathway toward enlightenment, toward greater awareness, toward healing, toward recovery. That's why you at times need somebody from outside of your context and perspective to offer you some perspective. That's why I still go to psychotherapy today. That's why my children go to psychotherapy. Like my daughter said a couple of years ago at a parenting workshop, my adult daughter said, I go to therapy so that my therapist can help me hold some of my guilt. Because breaking free of family dysfunction and patterns causes me a great deal of guilt. So I go to therapy so my therapist can help me carry that. She's talking about me. She's talking about carrying guilt and shame that I inadvertently gave to her because of my lack of healing. So yes, you're a bad parent and a good parent and everything in between. I want to be as clear as I can with you guys and not mince words. Hopefully to liberate you just a little bit from this idea of guilt and shame. I am a tough person to live with. I'm a handful. I saw an Amy Schumer stand-up recently where she said, what to look for in a spouse is just to look for somebody who can tolerate you. Right? I am a handful. I got issues. And my children benefit from me knowing that I'm a mess and that I make mistakes today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Here's the thing. You're going to make horrible mistakes next week. I'm going to make horrible mistakes next week. I'm going to make horrible mistakes tomorrow. I'm going to snap at my children out of impatience. I'm going to inadvertently shame them. I'm going to roll my eyes and put my stuff on them. I'm going to be passive aggressive. I'm going to let my frustration and anger leak because I'm so controlling and intense. All of that's going to happen. And if I don't see that, that's the miracle. If I don't see all of those dents and bruises that I carry around, it's a heavier burden for my children to carry. So my strange answer to your question is, it's your guilt and shame that is the issue to work on. Even more than the journey of the heroic parent. Although I would, the person who wrote that question, I would beg you to read the journey of the heroic parent, or the audacity to be you, or listen to them on Audible, the 2 books that I wrote. And just so you know, I make a grand total of about $3 on each of those. So if you can't afford it, or you want them for free, you specifically can email me and I will send them to you for free, a signed copy. The point being is that we have to make our healing our project. And this whole idea that we've had, that's why I talk about so much of unlearning and deprogramming. That's really what enlightenment is. It's not nearly as much about learning new things. It's about unlearning old things. So yes, we've all been bad parents. We've all made mistakes. We've all wounded our children. You cannot not dent your children psychologically. It's impossible. You are human. You are fallible. And your stuff gets on people that are close to you. And there's no escaping it. And you can run and hide in the mountains by yourself, but you will have solved nothing. The great Guru Ram Dass, who died a couple of years ago, this wonderful, enlightened, gentle, and wise soul, Ram Dass, used to say, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. You all have stuff. You have stuff. And you've dented your child. And it's the guilt and the shame, the epigraph of my book, of The Audacity to Be You. It says, why were each of us taught the notions of being correct when the very notion ensured our failure in the world? The problem with our collective understanding of mental health, folks, the great problem is that we think the goal is to be good. And with that idea in mind, we simply don't see ourselves honestly, because you are generous, you are giving, you are loving, you are kind, but you are also selfish and greedy and ignorant. And the only thing that blocks your ability to see those things and to tend to those wounds and those issues and those character deficits is your guilt and shame. So the fact that you wrote that question is wonderful, and you're on track. Keep doing it. And after a while, you will feel less guilt and you'll feel less shame, and you'll feel more empowered. You'll be more accountable. You'll be able to apologize easier. You won't be protecting this fragile ego and asking your children to protect this fragile ego, which, by the way, the protection of mother and father's ego is in a large part the burden that a lot of people are carrying. And I could go on and on and on about this because I love this topic. Somebody writes, who would you recommend writing letters to people in wilderness therapy outside of the immediate family? Our close family, friends, and those who know of the situation, encourage grandparents? Yes and no. It's each individual child. I think the more progress somebody makes, the wider the circle gets. I will tell you that I don't like letters coming straight to the child. that don't come through the parents because well-meaning but not educated or just simply not knowing family members and friends who are trying to be supported will oftentimes inadvertently send messages that are contraindicated for the child, that send the wrong message to the child. So remember, wilderness therapy is akin to a trauma unit at a hospital, an ER. And at an ER, we are dealing with trying to get the child to a safe place, trying to create a safe environment, trying to do first aid and to get that initial healing started. That extends to the family. And just like in an ER, they don't let lots of people in. They start off with mom and dad, parents. That might extend to the other immediate family members. And usually visiting opportunities don't extend to the broader family and the broader circle until the child moves down in level of care. And that's the same at Evoke. So there's no one answer. We like to give the child as much connection to the outside world as possible, but we also want to recognize that we're a very, very short-term program in the grand scheme of things. We're a very short, 2.5 months on average, 10 weeks on average. And with that, we like to keep the focus somewhat narrow. The same reason we don't let children read any book. Not because we don't believe that reading is great, because we do, but we want the focus a little bit more specific, a little bit more narrowed. So I wouldn't worry about it now. I might ask those questions as you go along with your therapist. And more often than not, those other letters, the child can experience those as some support, but oftentimes those other letters are triggers of homesickness. They're triggers because of the messages that they use or the things that they're missing. They're not easier for the child in many cases. And some they are, and some they give the child a little bit of sustenance that carries them a little bit. But in many, more than not, in many cases, they present challenges to the child and difficulties. And so for that reason, that's why we put them off for a little bit. We put off the connection with the extended circle for a little bit. All right, I have time for one more question. Somebody writes, when I've tried to apologize to my kids for what I see are my major lapses, they brush me off like it was no big deal. Always, don't they? My children do that too. My children do that too. It gets in there. It's an energy. It's a way of being. They'll appreciate it. It demonstrates your growth. It demonstrates the largeness of your growth and your healing. And I'm not talking about, let me be clear about this. When I encourage parents to apologize, it's very different to ask for forgiveness than to apologize. Those are completely different. Asking for forgiveness is for you and your ego. Apologizing is a gift that you give to somebody, acknowledging your contribution to their hurt. What they do with that, brush it off, throw it away, throw it in the garbage, doesn't matter. So if you're asking for forgiveness, you're not quite on the track that I'm describing. If you're apologizing, them brushing it off, what they do with it is none of your business. And what I will tell you is over time, it seeps in. Over time, they feel this respect. Over time, they see a model of somebody who has enough confidence, enough psychological wherewithal that they can be wrong, which many parents don't have. Oftentimes, with some parents, that looks like guilt or self-blame or phrases like, I can't do anything right, and I can't believe what I've done, and look how horrible I am. And on the other side, the defense looks like, I'm not the one with the problem. I'm doing just fine in my life. I know how to conduct my life successfully. Why do I need to apologize? It worked with the other kids, like the other question commented on. If it worked with the other kids, obviously it's not wrong. Therefore, you're the one with the issue. But the act of apologizing, the act of being in relationship with your child in a way that you can be wrong too, is a gift. But when we get attached to how they respond to the gift, We're trying to control what they feel and think, and they can sense it. I've said this. I'll end with this quote. It's strong, but I'll end with it. In dysfunctional families, there's one common and guarded idea and secret. Very, very often in dysfunctional families, there's this one guarded idea or secret that everybody is unconsciously enlisted in to support. And the idea is that the parents are good because the parents haven't worked out their own ego, their own healing, their own attachment fractures, and they need to be thought of as good. And they're defensive against that, right? That's what the defense is. But if you've done battle with guilt and shame, if you've made progress, you realize, yes, you have some gifts and you pass those on to your children. And you got a lot of crap too. And you pass that on to your children too, also. And the quicker that you can recognize that, the quicker that I can recognize that as a father, as a therapist, as a podcaster and a writer, the quicker I can realize that I'm not a piece of cake to deal with on a personal level, the better it is for my children, my spouse, my clients, my employees, and so forth. That's the real wisdom, is being in touch with your humanity, with your fallibility, not being good. And lastly, the quote from Carl Jung, which says it all. He said, I would rather be whole than good. Being around people who are interested in being good is a nightmare. Being around people that are human and have accepted their humanity, and therefore they've shed the defense to protect their ego. So you can be mad at them. You can be disappointed. You can be sad. You can be frustrated. They're a lot easier to live with. Thanks for the questions, folks. Great questions this evening from all of you. Very, very wonderful. All right, folks. Like I've mentioned, it's my teaching. If you're listening, if you're watching, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, The Audacity to Be You, available on Amazon and Audible. I encourage you strongly to read and to take a look at those. If you want to do a deep dive, I think that the greatest contribution you can make to your child's progress is to do an individual intensive for you. Our in-person intensive, Finding You, is that offering. August 16th through 20th, September 20th through 24th, October 18th to 22nd, outside of Park City, Utah and Midway, Utah. A wonderful setting, all inclusive, 4.5 days. Wonderful, wonderful setting. We have an online offering of this, September 15th through 17th. That's just 3 days, 2.5 days over a weekend. It's about a third of the cost. You don't have to travel, and you can get great work done. We also do Returning to You for people that want to revisit their work. October 25th through 29th is the one that I'll be running next. And then I'll be back to the UK to run a Finding You in the fall and or the spring of 2024, the fall of this year or the spring next year. We have custom Finding Connection intensives for couples, for co-parents. We also have Finding Family for families. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for more information. We have support groups, ongoing support groups for current and alumni Willers families. August 3rd, that's this Thursday, at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Those are at a new time now. 7 p.m. Mountain Time is the next offering. We have once a month alumni only meetings. August 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time is that next offering. And then once a month, we have an intensive support group. Our next offering for that is August 8th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Go to evoketherapy.com/family involvement for more information. If you want to do a wilderness experience while your child is in the program, we have family treks that we can customize for your family. So it's not just an overnight, not just a visit, but this is a multi-day process where you get to literally and figuratively get your hands dirty, really immerse yourselves in the process. You can do that during the program, at the end of the program, in between programs, or independent of the programs, even if you're not an Evoke client right now. Contact admissions at evoketherapy.com for more on our family treks, or ask your Evoke therapist. We have virtual coaching available for parents, couples, families, and individuals. That's all over the world. If you want a coach that's been introduced and immersed in the attachment-based process, you can contact coaching at evoketherapy.com to look over or find one that's a good match for you. We ask all current parents to go to 6 12-step support groups, any combination of Al-Anon.org, CODA.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, or AdultChildren.org. Also, refugerecovery.org or NAMI.org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, have free classes and resources in your local communities. All of these broadcasts are available on your favorite podcast app or Spotify. Just search Finding You an Evoke Therapy Podcast or go to soundcloud.com on your computer and listen there. You can also go to Evoke's YouTube channel and watch the rebroadcast of these video presentations there with the slides and my video face moving along, saying the things that I say. You can find Evoke Therapy Programs or me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter, Threads, or Instagram using the handle @Evoke Therapy or @Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. And also Evoke Intensives is on Instagram using the handle @Evoke Therapy Intensives. You can find us on Facebook by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives, and check out our blog, which has wonderful content each week. If you want to give back for people that can't afford treatment, the 3 charitable partners that we work with include ChooseMentalHealth.org, Sky'sTheLimitFund.org, or EvokeFamilyFoundation.org. You can earmark your donation, your tax-deductible donation, for a specific population of something that's near and dear to your heart, or to a specific program if that's your preference. I am so looking forward to my broadcast this Thursday. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. I'm going to be talking about attachment theory, and specifically, I'm going to read to you a children's book called You Are Special by Max Lucado. So it's a book review and an introduction to attachment theory and how it works. I love this book. It illustrates it so perfectly about how attachment theory and how attachment-based therapy works. So I look forward to that this Thursday, August 3rd. That's about 48 hours from now at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. From now on, these broadcasts are going to be at 6 p.m., as you may have noticed from this evening's start time. All right, folks. I hope this was a helpful point of contact for you this evening. Any leftovers questions, we'll go over to our next broadcast. And as always, for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for showing up and being willing to do your work. It makes a great difference. Makes a wonderful difference. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.